This week's episode of The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power, titled Eldest, introduces several eerie and iconic beings from Middle-earth. While the Ents and Tom Bombadil, played by Rory Kinnear, make their appearances, none are as terrifying as the Barrow-wights. These undead beings confront Elrond's Robert Aramayo company during their journey from Lindon to Eregion, creating one of the spookiest and most tension-filled moments of the series. The Barrow-wights not only push the elves to their limits, but nearly capture Galadriel Morfydd Clark in the process. This marks the first live-action portrayal of the Barrow-wights, and the show's interpretation of these creatures is both terrifying and visually impressive. However, fans familiar with Tolkien's works will notice a timeline discrepancy, as the Barrow-wights appear much earlier than they do in Tolkien's original Middle-earth chronology. Despite this, their inclusion provides a fascinating new layer to the ongoing conflict in the Rings of Power. In Tolkien's literary world, the Barrow-wights only appear in the Fellowship of the Ring, part of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Their role is brief but significant, as they create a moment of great peril for the hobbits early in their journey. The Barrow-wights are first introduced as malevolent spirits that inhabit the remains of dead kings and warriors. These corpses are buried in the Barrow Downs, a region located between the Old Forest and the village of Bree. Historically, the Barrow Downs served as the resting place for ancestors of the Edain, a group of noble men who aligned themselves with the Valar against Morgoth during the First Age. Over time, these burial mounds, known as barrows, became haunted by evil spirits. In the books, Frodo and his companions are lured into a deep sleep by the fog while traversing the Barrow Downs. They are captured by a Barrow-wight who drags them into one of the barrows and prepares to lay them out for burial, chanting sinister spells over them. Frodo, only half-conscious, calls out for help from Tom Bombadil, who arrives just in time to rescue the hobbit. Tolkien describes the Barrow-wights as malevolent forces, intent on ensnaring the living in their cold, deathly realm. These beings, though not introduced in great detail, are an embodiment of the sinister forces that linger in the forgotten corners of Middle-earth, waiting for the right moment to strike. The introduction of the Barrow-wights in the Rings of Power presents an intriguing deviation from Tolkien's timeline. According to the established lore, Barrow-wights don't come into existence until the Third Age, around 1500 years before the events of The Lord of the Rings. During this time, the Kingdom of Arnor, founded by Elendil, splits into three smaller realms, one of which is Cardolan. The Barrow Downs, along with the Old Forest and the Shire, fall within Cardolan's borders. However, as the Kingdom of Angmar rises under the command of the Witch King, these lands come under attack, and it is during this conflict that the Barrow-wights are first summoned. The Witch King calls upon evil spirits to possess the decaying bodies of the ancient Edain buried in the Barrow Downs, turning the region into a place of fear and death. In the Rings of Power, the presence of the Barrow-wights is explained differently. When Elrond and his company find their path to Eregion blocked by a destroyed bridge, Cumnor, played by Callum Lynch, suggests they take an alternative route through the hills of Tirn Gorthad. This region, known as the Barrow Downs in the Third Age, lies to the south of their original path. Shortly after, Elrond and his company encounter the Barrow-wights. One major difference is the implication that Sauron, not the Witch King of Angmar, is responsible for raising the Barrow-wights in the Second Age. The series suggests that Sauron summoned these undead creatures to block the elves' path, making it difficult for them to reach Eregia region. This twist offers a compelling new interpretation of how Sauron's influence extends beyond his direct actions, setting traps and utilizing dark forces to prevent his enemies from uniting against him. The battle between Elrond, Galadriel, and the Barrow-wights is one of the most intense and visually striking sequences in the Rings of Power so far. The undead creatures move slowly and deliberately, their piercing blue eyes adding to their chilling aura. As they attack the elves, chains rattle ominously, evoking the imagery of their former royal status. These details help create a sense of dread as the Barrow-wights relentlessly pursue their targets. However, the real challenge comes when the elves discover that regular blows are ineffective against the Barrow-wights. Every time they strike one down, the creature reforms and continues its attack. It's only through Elrond's deep knowledge of Middle-earth's lore that they discover how to defeat these beings. They must be struck with the very weapons they were buried with, This is a new piece of lore introduced by the series, as Tolkien never specified how Barrow-wights could be killed. In the books, these creatures are already dead and cannot be defeated through conventional means. However, Tom Bombadil's intervention, which involves dispelling the wights with his power and bringing sunlight into the Barrow, demonstrates that these dark entities are vulnerable to light. This new lore, while a deviation from Tolkien's original text, adds an interesting layer to the series' interpretation of Middle-earth's dark forces. The Barrow-wights in the Rings of Power are portrayed as more corporeal and formidable, making their presence a significant obstacle for Elrond's company. The Barrow-wights, while not major players in the grand narrative of the Lord of the Rings, hold a unique place in Middle-earth's mythology. They represent the lingering evil that can pervade even the most ancient and sacred places. Their association with the Witch King of Angmar and Sauron ties them directly to the larger forces of darkness at work in Middle-earth, and their ability to trap the living in a death-like state adds to their fearsome reputation. In the Rings of Power, the decision to bring the Barrow-wights into the story early expands on the themes of dread and decay that often accompany Sauron's rise to power. By introducing these undead creatures, the show emphasizes the pervasive threat that Sauron represents, not just as a physical force, but as a corrupting influence capable of reanimating the dead and ensnaring the living. Fans of Tolkien's work have expressed mixed reactions to the introduction of the Barrow-wights in the Rings of Power. On one hand, viewers appreciate the eerie and menacing portrayal of these creatures. The visual design, including their glowing blue eyes and slow, methodical movements, has been praised for capturing the sense of dread that the Barrow-wights evoke. However, some purists have raised concerns about the show's departure from the established timeline and lore. The Barrow-wights' appearance in the Second Age, long before they are supposed to exist, is a significant deviation from Tolkien's writings. For some fans, this change represents a larger trend of the show taking liberties with the source material, which has been a point of contention throughout the series. Despite these criticisms, the Barrow-wights have undeniably added a new layer of tension and horror to the Rings of Power. Their presence in the show not only raises the stakes for Elrond and his companions, but also expands on the dark forces at play in Middle-earth. Whether or not they will continue to play a role in the series remains to be seen, but their debut has left a lasting impression on viewers. The Barrow-wights' appearance in the Rings of Power Season 2 has brought a chilling and unexpected twist to the series. These undead beings, though introduced earlier than in Tolkien's timeline, serve as a formidable obstacle for Elrond's company and deepen the show's exploration of Middle-earth's darker corners. While some fans may be divided over the changes to the lore, there's no denying that the Barrow-wights have made a memorable and terrifying debut.